My name is Evelyn. When you reach 72, people start assuming you no longer notice the quiet shifts in the room, or the subtle ways your own flesh and blood begin eyeing what you spent a lifetime building. My family thought they were orchestrating a silent takeover of my life, playing a high-stakes game while I sat comfortably in the dark. What they didn't realize was that I picked up on their opening move before they even made it. I didn't break down, I didn't raise my voice, and I certainly didn't panic. Instead, I gave them the exact story they wanted to hear, right up until the moment they walked straight into a trap of their own making. If you appreciate a cold, calculated lesson in why you should never underestimate experience, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now. And before we begin, let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from today, and what time is it over there right now? Now, grab a warm drink, sit back, and let me tell you how it all began. At 72 years old, I have learned that the sweetest phrase in the English language isn't happy retirement or bon voyage. It's paid off. The day I made my final mortgage payment on my 2-story craftsman home, I took the physical deed, placed it on my kitchen island, and stared at it for a long time. There were no bank liens, no outstanding balances, and no monthly mortgage notes hanging over my head. Every single square foot of brick, polished hardwood, and manicured lawn belonged entirely to me. In America, self-reliance isn't just a warm ideal you talk about over Sunday dinner. It is a rigid standard you live by. For me, financial independence was my armor, and I wore it with quiet, immense pride. When my husband, Arthur, passed away 7 years ago, several well-meaning friends suggested I downsize immediately. They told me managing a 4-bedroom suburban property on my own would eventually prove too exhausting for a widow my age. My neighbor, Sarah, leaned over the wooden fence one sunny afternoon and said, "Evelyn, you really ought to consider moving into a nice luxury senior community where someone else handles all the maintenance and decisions." I looked her dead in the eye and replied, "Sarah, the moment I hand over the keys and let someone else manage my living space is the exact moment I give up control of my life. I like my lawn, I like my space, and above all, I like my absolute freedom." I wasn't about to surrender my autonomy to anyone. I had spent 40 years working as a senior accountant for a major regional logistics firm, and financial numbers were second nature to me. Managing my finances was never a chore. It was my favorite daily ritual. Every Monday morning, I sat at my dark mahogany desk with a fresh cup of black roast coffee, booted up my laptop, and carefully reviewed my entire financial portfolio. I kept meticulous track of my 401k rollovers, index funds, municipal bonds, and high-yield savings accounts down to the very last cent. I knew my exact net worth at any given hour of the day. If an unexpected property tax assessment arrived in the mail, I didn't panic or run for help. I analyzed the figures, double-checked the local county tax codes, filed my paperwork on time, and settled the bill instantly without touching my reserves. My daily life was structured, calm, and deeply fulfilling. I spent my early mornings tending to my backyard garden, coaxing vibrant hydrangeas and fresh heirloom tomatoes from the rich soil. In the afternoons, I read American history books, stayed updated on local real estate market trends, and handled my household errands on my own schedule. Local contractors and business owners knew better than to try to pull a fast one on me. When a local roofing contractor gave me an inflated estimate for minor gutter repairs last summer, I pulled out my own blueprinted calculations. I handed the paper back to him and said, "Frank, I know the exact market cost of materials per square foot, and I know how many labor hours this job requires. Give me a fair, realistic estimate, or I will hire someone else who will." He adjusted his price downward by 20% within 5 minutes. That was simply how I operated. I treated my life like a well-run corporation, and I was the undisputed, sharp-minded chief executive officer. I didn't need lavish European vacations or flashy new sports cars to feel accomplished. My wealth was quietly working for me in secure, low-risk accounts, ensuring that I would never have to ask anyone for a single favor or a single dollar. I took deep comfort in knowing that I had built an ironclad foundation for my golden years. I was completely self-sufficient, sharp as a tack, and living life entirely on my own terms. My home was my sanctuary, my finances were bulletproof, and my peace of mind was non-negotiable. I thought I had everything permanently secured, completely unaware that my quiet financial stability was about to draw the hungry eyes of the two people I had raised. That peaceful stability didn't last. It began subtly, with an unexpected rise in visits from my son, Jason, his wife, Chloe, my daughter, Megan, and her husband, Mark. For years, holiday dinners and the occasional Sunday visit were their limit. But suddenly, they were dropping by 2 or 3 times a week, bearing cheap bakery pies and overly affectionate greetings. It didn't take an accountant to see right through them. I noticed the tension written all over their faces, the hushed arguments in my hallway, and the subtle details of their lives falling apart. Mark had been laid off from his sales job 6 months prior, yet he drove up in a brand new, leased luxury SUV. Chloe was constantly showing off designer handbags while complaining about high interest rates. One Sunday afternoon, while we were sitting in the living room, Jason casually brought up the topic of inflation. "Mom," he said, leaning forward on the sofa with a practiced, concerned look, "the economy is completely unpredictable right now. People your age are losing their savings left and right because they can't manage their assets aggressively enough." I took a slow sip of my coffee, met his gaze, and said, "Jason, my portfolio is fully diversified. My home is completely paid off, and I have 0 debt. My financial security is the last thing you need to worry about." Megan immediately jumped in, her tone dripping with forced sweetness. "We just worry about you, Mom. Managing a house like this and keeping track of all those investment accounts is a massive burden for one person. Wouldn't it be easier if you let us handle the heavy lifting?" "I don't need anyone to do my heavy lifting," I replied firmly, closing the conversation right there. When direct persuasion failed, their strategy shifted towards something far more sinister. They started targeting my mind. It began with small, calculated disruptions around the house. I would leave my reading glasses on the nightstand, only to find them 2 hours later inside the kitchen pantry. My master key ring, which always hung on the brass hook by the front door, mysteriously ended up tucked inside a decorative vase in the living room. At first, I double-checked my own memory, but I quickly realized the pattern. These weren't honest mistakes. They were orchestrated setups. Every time an item turned up in an absurd location, my children were right there to highlight it. "Mom, you left your car keys in the refrigerator again," Mark said one afternoon, holding them up with a dramatic sigh as if he had just made a tragic discovery. "You've been doing this a lot lately. Are you sure you're feeling all right?" "I didn't put those keys in the refrigerator, Mark," I said, my voice deadpan. "Come on, Mom. Who else would have put them there?" Chloe chimed in, lowering her voice as if talking to a fragile child. "It's okay to admit you're becoming forgetful. It happens to everyone at your age. You don't have to hide it from us." They were gaslighting me, trying to build a narrative that I was losing my mental sharpness. They wanted me to doubt my own sanity, hoping I would panic and hand over the reins of my life out of fear. But they forgot one crucial detail. I spent 40 years analyzing financial discrepancies for a living. I knew how to recognize a paper trail of deception when I saw one. Instead of arguing or reacting emotionally, I started keeping a private journal, logging every single visit, every misplaced item, and every passive-aggressive comment they made. They thought they were playing a clever game with an aging, vulnerable mother. They had no idea I was documenting every single move they made, quietly preparing for the storm I knew was coming. The gaslighting attempts continued for another 2 weeks, but the mask slipped off entirely on a Tuesday evening. Jason and Megan had come over under the pretense of dropping off groceries. After putting the bags away in the kitchen, they thought I had retired to my bedroom upstairs for my usual evening rest. In reality, I had left my study door slightly ajar, stopped to retrieve a book from the side table. As I stepped quietly down the hallway carpet, I heard low, urgent voices coming from my home office. I stopped near the door, keeping out of sight, and listened. "We can't keep waiting for her to make a major mistake." Megan's voice was sharp, stripped of all her usual phony warmth. "Her memory isn't failing fast enough. She still tracks every single dollar in her accounts." "That's why we don't wait for her," Jason replied coldly. "I talked to the probate attorney this morning. If we file an emergency petition for temporary conservatorship and full power of attorney, we can bypass her consent entirely. We just need to establish a documented pattern of cognitive decline." "Is the draft petition ready?" Chloe asked. "Right here," Jason said, the rustle of heavy paper echoing through the doorway. "Once the court grants us medical power of attorney, we gain immediate access to her bank accounts and her 401k. From there, selling this house is a piece of cake. We list it at top market value, pay off our debts, and put her in a managed care facility down in the county." Mark chuckled softly. She'll complain at first, but with a diagnosed dementia claim on record, no judge is going to listen to an old woman claiming her kids are stealing her home. My blood ran cold for half a second, but my rational mind instantly took over. This wasn't just greed. It was a hostile takeover of my entire existence. They wanted to declare me legally incompetent, strip away my constitutional rights, liquidate my life's work, and lock me away in a facility against my will. I didn't gasp. I didn't break down in tears. Panicking was a luxury I couldn't afford, and confronting them now would only tip my hand and force them to accelerate their timeline. I quietly stepped back into my bedroom and waited until I heard the front door click shut as they left. Once the house was completely silent, I walked into my office. There, sitting right beside my desktop printer, was a stray page from the legal document packet Jason had brought in. In his rush to leave, he had left behind a printout titled "Petition for Involuntary Conservatorship and Emergency Power of Attorney." I picked up the document and scanned the text. It was filled with fabricated allegations, claims that I was wandering the neighborhood confused, neglecting basic self-care, and exhibiting severe memory loss. They had even drafted supporting statements from pseudo-medical consultants, waiting for a formal signature to present to a judge. I sat down at my desk, smoothed out the paper, and read every single clause with the clinical precision of a seasoned auditor. The stakes were crystal clear now. This was no longer just a family dispute over an inheritance. It was an all-out war for my freedom, my dignity, and my home. They thought they were dealing with a fragile, helpless old woman who would cower under pressure. They forgot that I had spent 40 years dismantling corporate fraud and outmaneuvering bad actors in high-stakes negotiations. A slow, cold smile crossed my face as I folded the document neatly and placed it inside my safe. I didn't get mad. I got strategic. "You want to play legal games?" I whispered to the empty room. "Then let's play." My children thought they were setting a trap for me. They had no idea they had just handed me the exact weapon I needed to destroy their entire plan. The next morning, I woke up at 5:30 sharp. I didn't alter my routine by a single minute. When Megan called at noon, under the guise of checking in on me, I deliberately adopted a slow, slightly hesitating tone over the speakerphone. "Oh, hello, dear. I was just trying to remember where I left my reading glasses," I said, giving her the exact narrative she wanted to hear. On the other end, I could practically hear her smirking as she replied, "Take it easy, Mom. Don't stress your mind out over little things." The second I hung up, my passive persona vanished. I picked up my phone and dialed the office of Thomas Sterling, a premier elder law attorney who had managed my late husband's estate affairs years ago. Thomas was a formidable veteran in courtroom litigation, specializing in high-stakes asset protection and combating financial elder exploitation. An hour later, I sat in Thomas's polished office downtown. I laid the stolen page of the conservatorship petition across his mahogany desk, right beside my detailed ledger of misplaced items, timestamps, and suspicious visits from my children over the past month. Thomas scanned the document, his brow furrowing deeper with every line. He looked up, his expression stern. "Evelyn, this is a calculated attempt at a forced conservatorship. If they file this with a sympathetic court referee, they could temporarily freeze your bank accounts before you even get a formal hearing. I know, I said, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion, which is why we aren't playing defense. We are going to dismantle their medical argument before they even file the paperwork. Tell me what my first move is. Thomas smiled, a sharp, approving edge to his mouth. We need an unquestionable, ironclad medical evaluation from an independent board-certified neurologist, not a primary care doctor they can sway, but a top-tier regional clinic whose findings no probate judge in this state would dare question. By 10 o'clock the following morning, Thomas had secured an immediate priority appointment for me at the Regional Memory and Cognitive Disorders Center, 2 counties over. I underwent 3 hours of rigorous diagnostic testing. They administered the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, complex pattern recognition exams, delayed verbal memory recalls, and detailed neuropsychological evaluations. I tackled every logic puzzle, spatial exercise, and backward math sequence with the sharp precision of a senior accountant dissecting a fraudulent ledger. When the chief neurologist, Dr. Bennett, sat down with me to review the final results, he shook his head in genuine admiration. Mrs. Vance, your cognitive processing speed and working memory are in the top 2% for any demographic, let alone 72, Dr. Bennett said, placing his official signature and state seal on the summary. Your MoCA score is a perfect 30 out of 30. Legally and medically, you possess complete executive capacity and mental acuity. I took the certified, notarized report directly back to Thomas's office. He placed the original inside a thick maroon legal binder alongside a newly drafted revocable living trust. We spent 2 hours restructuring every clause, ensuring my assets were completely shielded from any legal challenge or future contestation. With this certified evaluation and updated trust in hand, their conservatorship petition is dead on arrival, Thomas explained, tapping the thick binder. If they present those fraudulent statements in court now, they face immediate perjury charges and civil liability for attempted elder abuse. We aren't going to court just yet, I replied with cold resolve. I want to execute my response on my own terms, in my own home, right when they believe they've won. They are hosting a family dinner at my house this Friday to push their plan forward. Have the finalized paperwork ready in your briefcase. Thomas nodded with professional respect, closing his briefcase. I will be waiting outside in my car. Give me the signal, and I'll walk right in. Friday evening arrived right on schedule. At 6 o'clock sharp, 2 luxury SUVs pulled into my driveway. Jason, Megan, Chloe, and Mark walked through my front door carrying expensive takeout containers from an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. They were beaming with exaggerated warmth, treating me with the delicate care reserved for a fragile glass vase. "Mom, you look tired," Megan said immediately, taking my arm and leading me toward the dining room table, as if I couldn't navigate my own hallway. "Don't lift a finger tonight. We brought dinner, and we're taking care of everything." "Thank you, Megan," I said, intentionally lowering my voice to sound slightly frail. "That's very thoughtful of you all." Throughout the meal, they put on a masterclass in synthetic affection. Mark poured wine, Chloe asked overly gentle questions about my garden, and Jason kept making approving comments whenever I finished a portion of my food. It was almost impressive how seamlessly they coordinated their act. Every gesture, every soft smile was designed to lower my defenses and reinforce the subtle lie that I was a declining old woman in desperate need of protection. I ate quietly, letting them control the room and talk over me. I watched their subtle eye contact across the table, the nervous tapping of Mark's fingers on his glass, and the rigid posture Jason maintained throughout the main course. They were eager, impatient to execute the trap they had spent weeks preparing. As soon as the dinner plates were cleared, Jason reached down into his leather briefcase resting by his chair. He pulled out a thick blue legal folder and placed it squarely in the middle of the dining table. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, from forced warmth to calculated business. "Mom," Jason began, leaning forward and resting his hands on the table with a practiced, solemn expression, "we need to talk about your long-term security. The world is getting complicated, and managing a home and financial portfolio of this size is becoming a massive burden. Megan reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. We hate seeing you stressed, Mom. Yesterday you mentioned misplacing your keys again, and we just can't sit back and let something worse happen. Jason opened the folder, revealing a stack of legal documents topped with yellow sign here tabs. This is a standard durable power of attorney and medical directive packet. It simply authorizes Megan and me to handle your administrative tasks, manage your bank accounts, and step in for medical decisions if you ever feel overwhelmed. It's purely routine formal paperwork, Mom, Chloe added smoothly, handing me a heavy black pen. It gives you total peace of mind knowing your family is legally empowered to protect you and your assets from bad actors. Mark leaned in from the side, his tone laced with subtle urgency. We actually have a mobile notary arriving in 20 minutes to witness everything. We wanted to get this off your plate tonight so you don't have to worry about a single thing going forward. Just sign on the flagged lines. I looked at the documents on the table, then looked up at the four faces staring back at me. Their eyes were filled with hungry expectation, practically salivating at the thought of gaining immediate legal control over my paid-off home, my 401k, and my bank accounts before the night was over. They thought they had backed me into a corner with high-pressure sales tactics and emotional manipulation. I sat back in my chair, picked up the pen, and balanced it casually between my fingers. I didn't tremble, and I didn't look confused. I let the silence stretch across the room until the smug grins on their faces began to falter. You've all put a tremendous amount of thought into this, I said, my voice completely steady. It's amazing how efficient you can be when $4 million in total assets are on the line. The silence in the dining room became deafening. Jason's confident smile froze, while Megan blinked in utter confusion. Mom, what are you talking about? Jason asked, his voice cracking. We're just trying to protect you. I casually tossed the pen onto the center of the documents. No, Jason, you are trying to steal from me. Before he could respond, the heavy chime of my front doorbell rang. I simply called out, It's open, Thomas. The front door opened, and Thomas Sterling walked into the dining room, carrying a thick leather binder under his arm. He stepped up to the table and set his briefcase down with a sharp thud. Who the hell is this? Mark demanded, standing up. This is Thomas Sterling, my estate planning attorney, I said, my voice deadpan and razor sharp. And he is here to ensure your little corporate takeover ends right now. Jason scrambled to cover the paperwork. Mom, this is ridiculous. You aren't in the right mental state to make legal decisions. We have proof of your cognitive decline. Is that so? I smiled calmly, opening my drawer and pulling out a stamped folder. I slapped it down in front of Jason. Then review this certified evaluation from the regional clinic, signed by Dr. Bennett. Megan snatched the folder, eyes darting across the medical summary. A perfect 30 out of 30 on the MOCA test, I announced clearly. My mental capacity is entirely flawless. Your fabricated claims of dementia are officially useless. Chloe turned pale. Mom, we were just worried. Shut up, Chloe, I interrupted. I heard every word you said in my office 3 nights ago. I heard you plotting to freeze my accounts, sell my home, and lock me in a care facility. Did you think I wouldn't notice your pathetic gaslighting tactics? Misplacing keys, moving glasses, planting items in the fridge? I spent 40 years auditing corporate fraud. You amateurs couldn't outsmart me if your lives depended on it. I saw through your clumsy manipulation from the very first week. You thought my age made me weak, but you forgot who built this household from the ground up. Thomas opened his binder, pulling out newly executed legal instruments. Mrs. Vance has formally executed a new revocable living trust, Thomas stated coldly. All previous wills and powers of attorney are permanently revoked. What does that mean? Megan whispered, trembling. I looked my daughter straight in the eye. It means, Megan, that every single asset I own, this paid-off house, my investments, and my 401k, has been placed into an irrevocable trust. Upon my death, 100% of my estate goes directly to the County Animal Rescue Foundation. You're giving our inheritance to dogs? Mark exploded, slamming his fist onto the table. That's our money. It was never your money, Mark, I said with icy contempt. It was my hard-earned life's work. I worked 40 years to pay off every brick of this house. I built my nest egg to secure my golden years, not to fund your reckless spending. As of 5 o'clock today, all 4 of you are explicitly and entirely disinherited. You won't receive a single dime or a single square inch of this property. Jason stood up, face flushed with rage. We'll contest this in court. Thomas stepped forward, handing Jason a thick file. Go ahead and try, Jason. Included here are certified affidavits, audio recordings, and spotless medical records. If you attempt to challenge this trust or file a fraudulent conservatorship, I will file formal criminal complaints for attempted elder financial abuse, fraud, and felony conspiracy before sunset tomorrow. The room went dead quiet. They realized with absolute terror that the game was over. Jason stood frozen, staring down at the thick legal file in his shaking hands as if it were radioactive. The color had drained completely from Chloe's face, and Megan sat trembling in her chair, her jaw working silently without a single word coming out. Mark opened his mouth to offer one last pathetic legal threat, but Thomas cut him off before he could utter another syllable. If you remain on this private property past 6:30 p.m., Thomas said, his voice ringing with absolute authority, I will personally contact the county sheriff to have all 4 of you immediately arrested for criminal trespass. Furthermore, any future attempt to contact, intimidate, or harass Mrs. Vance directly will result in an immediate temporary restraining order and criminal elder abuse charges filed against each of you. I stood up slowly from the head of the dining table, resting my palms flat against the dark polished wood. I looked across at all 4 of them, the children I had raised and the greedy partners they had chosen, and felt no regret, no lingering bitterness, and certainly no hesitation. Take your expensive takeout containers, take your fake concerns, and get out of my house, I said, keeping my voice low, clear, and unflinching. You came here tonight expecting to strip away my rights and steal my assets, but you are leaving with nothing. This home is mine, my life is mine, and you are no longer welcome in either. They didn't argue further. The crushing weight of their defeat, backed by undeniable medical evidence and ironclad legal documents, left them with no leverage whatsoever. Jason shoved his empty folder into his briefcase. Megan grabbed her designer purse without daring to look me in the eye, and Mark practically pushed Chloe toward the front door. Within 3 minutes, the heavy oak front door clicked shut behind them. A moment later, 2 engines started up, and their luxury SUVs sped a whiff down my driveway into the gathering twilight. Thomas smiled quietly, placing the remaining original deeds into his leather briefcase. You handled that with absolute perfection, Evelyn. The county recorder will have the revised trust deed officially logged by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. They cannot touch a single dollar of your estate. Thank you, Thomas, I said, shaking his hand with genuine gratitude. You've given me something far more valuable than simple asset protection. You've guaranteed my peace of mind. In the months that followed, the consequences of their financial recklessness played out exactly as I had predicted. Without access to my 401k or the equity in my paid-off home to bail them out, their massive consumer debts caught up with them fast. Jason and Chloe were forced to short-sell their suburban house and move into a small rental apartment. Megan and Mark lost both of their leased luxury vehicles to repossession and filed for personal bankruptcy before the year was out. They tried calling my landline a few times from unfamiliar phone numbers, begging for financial help and reconciliation, but I blocked every single line without listening to a second of their excuses. They didn't miss their mother. They missed the fortune they thought they were entitled to inherit. As for me, my daily life returned to the tranquil, structured rhythm I had always loved. I went down to the County Animal Rescue Foundation, the very shelter that would one day inherit my estate, and adopted Barnaby, a 10-year-old senior tabby cat who needed a quiet, loving home. Now, on a warm Tuesday afternoon, I sit comfortably on my front porch swing with a fresh cup of Earl Grey tea resting on the side table beside me. Barnaby purrs softly in my lap, basking in the warm sunlight filtering through the tall oak trees lining my pristine front lawn. I take a slow, satisfying sip of tea and look out over my property. Every stone, every brick, and every blade of grass belongs completely and irrevocably to me. I played the long game, stayed 3 steps ahead of their schemes, and protected my freedom without ever compromising my dignity. At 72 years old, I am completely independent, entirely secure, and living life strictly on my own terms. And that, to me, is the ultimate American victory.